Greetings, friends. My name is Jessa McLean, and I'm here to provide you with some blueprints of disruption. This weekly podcast is dedicated to amplifying the work of activists, examining power structures, and sharing the success stories from the grassroots. Through these discussions, we hope to provide folks with the tools and the inspiration they need to start to dismantle capitalism, decolonize our spaces, and bring about the political revolution that we know we need. Indigenous people are quite literally on the front lines of the fight for climate justice. They've been battling resource extraction industries and dealing with those harmful impacts for decades now. Those industries they're up against, like logging, mining, and of course oil and gas, have been forever backed by the federal and provincial governments. They also enjoy unchecked protection from Canadian police. The Coastal GasLink through Wet'suwet'en territory is a prime example of this. The RCMP have been notoriously violent against land defenders there. But it's not the only pipeline being pushed through unceded Indigenous territory by the governing BC-NDP. The Prince Rupert gas transmission pipeline, if built, would transport liquefied natural gas, LNG, 800 kilometers across 1,000 different waterways. Its approval is based on an inadequate, outdated environmental assessment, and the youth of the Gitz'an Nation are not having it. Inspired by the blockades put in place to halt the project and calls for more involvement, young Indigenous people like Drew are stepping into roles they never imagined themselves in, but are fully prepared for and thriving at. Organizing their communities, giving voice to a generation that wasn't included in the decision to put the PRGT through their lands, but who will have to deal with its repercussions the most. Listen in as Drew takes us through her journey into activism and how she's working with other youth to preserve their communities, their culture, and protect all our water.
Hetty, thank you for having me. Sizoze, Drew Harris. I'm a proud member of the Wet'suwet'en and Gitz'an Nations. I'm from the Small Frog clan, Lax'yip, and I'm from the House of Many Eyes, Ganehe Leia. I'm born and raised on Gitz'an territory in the Hazeltons. I'm a dedicated advocate for Indigenous rights and environmental protection. My journey started as a summer intern last year with the Skeena Watershed Conservation Coalition. I'm now the lead organizer in leadership support and development. So I get to work closely with youth, community leaders, and other amazing people I met along the way to safeguard our territories from industrial exploitation, and including my newly formed youth group called the Firekeepers.
Oh, we'll have to talk about the Firekeepers.
Yeah.
They were in my notes. Excellent.
Yeah. And yeah, I was away during school for the last 6 years, so I haven't been in my communities only in the summertime. So during the CGL raid in 2021, I was away from home and I felt really hopeless watching all of that through my phone. So now this time that I'm home and my Gitz'an side is facing the same industry and battle, I wanted to make sure I did my part. So I really only started my activism in land protection last May when I returned home.
I'm chuckling because if you look up Drew's name and check the show notes for, the work being done here, I think you'll understand why it seems like I had a seasoned vet in the studio, done a lot of work in that time. And you, before we started recording, you talked about the learning curve that must be there. That is amazing. I'm curious to hear more about that journey as well and how you've been able to just step into that role to mobilize your community.
Yeah, it's really interesting. My life definitely took a change last year when I moved home in May and took this job at the Skeena Watershed. I was super shy, kept to myself, didn't really talk about politics because I was scared. And then I came home and I saw all this stuff happening and I was really anxious in the state of the world. And I was I need something to do than just be anxious and worried. And it was this job just landed right in front of me and came to me. And it felt like the world was aligning us. And that's how it started. And it opened my eyes up to all the stuff that was happening on my own territory that I wasn't even aware of. Yeah, I felt like it was my cultural responsibility to carry on what our ancestors have been doing. And it just came so naturally to me. Like, I feel like this is what I was meant to do. And in the last year, everything has shaped and like really solidified that for me. I'm learning as I go, and this PRGT pipeline is like a huge, confusing web. So every day I'm still learning more things. So also, I just want to tell people like, don't be scared to start because I thought I couldn't really make a difference or impact, and I would just keep surprising myself along with others. And it's really easy to get into this field with the amazing support you have as well from everyone.
Without having to make you do that heavy lifting all over again, because there will be resources in the show notes, but can you share some of your knowledge of what's happening on your lands there that spurred you to action?
Yeah, so in 2014, I believe, there was an agreement signed by about 15 or so hereditary leaders in the Gitz'an territory for this PRGT agreement. Members of the house groups were not consulted or informed before any agreements were made. So these were lots of behind closed door agreements. And even now, we still don't know what was made on those agreements or what amounts the individuals have received from those agreements.
And it was based on an environmental assessment done in 2010 even. So, when you say 2014, that's the agreement date, but their assessment,
Yeah.
we've learned a lot since then. We not? I thought that was one of the most interesting part in the way that it's being challenged is has that generational discussion within it, right? Not just
Yeah.
that's outdated technology, which I think we could all agree on, but that the folks that'll be most likely impacted from it had no say as well, right? So that time that had gone on since the time of the agreement until now, you're talking about 15 years from the assessment, and just to go at this fight from the perspective of youth and then to have a youth talk about it saying, we weren't consulted, even we know better now, than the 15 folks that might have signed that way back when, right? So do you want to talk about choosing that path and then obviously having youth do a lot of the lifting too?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big problem that we've been struggling with. And even now, 15 years later, some of those chiefs that signed also don't agree anymore and don't want this project to go through. And also, lots of the title holders that signed on passed away. So they carried their signature on to the next person that takes the name. So now they're stuck in a legally binding agreement. And it's just, yeah, it's really crazy. Yeah, the youth started realizing, like, why weren't we involved in any of these conversations? And lots of the assessment that is done on over 15 years ago, like on the water sources, 15 years later, our waters are drying up. Like, we don't have the same creeks and water that we used to have when they made this decision to use all our water sources to, like, work this project. Like, the amount of water that they need to run these projects is insane. And they're planning to use all our freshwater creeks. And just last summer was the first time that the Kispiox River ever had to shut down to recreational fishing because of the low water and high water temperatures that we were experiencing, which was unprecedented. So we're seeing these changes coming really fast in our rivers, and they're affecting our salmon already. Like, our salmon are already struggling. So bringing in projects like this would just be detrimental to the salmon, and we're already really close to losing them. And a lot of people don't know that.
Well, am I safe to say the majority of the community that's there now with these tangible effects already in play, right? Like affecting their livelihoods and their culture, are they mostly against this? Right? Is it obvious that this pipeline will be a disaster for them?
Yeah, that's the struggle we're seeing now, and why we started our youth group. We really just want to bring awareness to our community members because lots of people don't know the state of our rivers and of our salmon, so they don't understand the risk that this is bringing to our livelihood. And another problem with indigenous communities that were left in poverty a lot, designed by the system to put us here and keep us in poverty, to keep us hooked on resource extraction, which is where these projects get their say in. They promise jobs and economic stability, all these big promises that have to do with money, which really overweighs people's decisions, because when you can't put food on the table or pay for your roof, it makes it hard to turn down projects like these that are promising you to take care of your family, basically.
Well, I was going to ask about people's mood, and I guess that's where I'm going because, and I understand your frustration of having to explain all of this over and over again, like the situation or the technical aspects or the ownership and, the legal mishmash that goes on in addressing this when it just seems so obvious, but you hate being stuck in that stage because action is what's needed, right? And you kind of got to get people to that point. That's not to say that you folks haven't taken any action. I do want to talk about the community town halls, but also the blockades. So clearly, some folks are, you know, they're done talking about it. I mean, I'm sure they're still talking about it. That's always part of the work. But there's blockades. Are they still ongoing?
Our youth group hasn't done any blockades or anything, but the Gitnya Hereditary Chiefs have set up a roadblock to monitor and prevent the LNG workers from accessing their territory. So they started that last fall once they announced that they're going to try to start construction. And I think around November they ended the construction for the winter, so they got to go and rest for a bit. But now we're starting up again. Now that we're waiting for this environmental assessment decision on if it counts, if it gets extended or not. So there's organizing and preparing, and we're just waiting for the decision of the government now before we can take action. There's another couple camps that I've been supporting and involving. There's a new one, Soph, and it's a new dog sanctuary out on the Kispiox Valley. Our good friend Teresa Brown has been living out there since last fall, and it's about a 2 hour drive in the middle of nowhere, no service or anything. But she's been living there, taking care of puppies. I have a puppy now from there.
When you say a dog camp, though, does it like serve as a blockade of sorts, like a barrier to further development?
It's near the pipeline right away, and it's on her house territory. So she's just living on her territory again, and
She's just exercising her rights, right? Like she's just living her life, and but she just happens to be in the way of perhaps some work. I get it.
and res dog. She's saving the res dog, so it's really fun out there too.
Yeah, no, it's hitting multiple targets, right? We can take care of a bunch of things at once, but let's hear about what the youth are kind of focused on doing as their plan of action. Not that you're a homogenous group, but you have had discussions. You managed to hold some community halls, and from reports, like hundreds of people attend them. So folks are willing to listen to youth.
It's really great. Like the support in the last few months has been amazing, and there's definitely been a shift in like our energy that I've been feeling. Because when I first came back last summer, there was community meetings being held. One of our members, Cullen Sutherland Wilson, he does lots of work too. He helped out the Wet'suwet'en and the CGL. He was at the in Victoria at that time, but he's done lots of great land defense work, and he was hosting meetings like every month or so, and we would have discussions for hours and hours about how we don't want this pipeline. Everyone was very adamant that we didn't want this pipeline, but the conversation would just kind of go in circles and we wouldn't really get anywhere, and there was just lots of like anger, which is fair. Like we're mad we didn't sign up for this project, but here it is being forced into our territory. So the youth were talking, and we're like, I remember specifically at one meeting, I was there, and one of my coworkers was there, and he got up to speak after everyone was, all the elders and Samogits were speaking. He came up and he's like, "Why isn't there many young people out here?" This is our future that they're talking about and making decisions. And there's no youth up here talking. So I decided I should come up here and say something as a youth. And I remember when he said that, it sparked something in me. And I was like, he's so right. Like, why am I just sitting here listening to everyone else make decisions about my future when I'll be the one living through it all and cleaning up the mess? That really sparked something in me. And then at the end of the summer, Simogits voluntold us, me and my cousin. She was my intern with me in the summer too.
Voluntold.
Yeah,
Yeah.
voluntold. So we are like,
This is what you're doing.
we had a week to plan our week to plan a meeting. So we got together and hosted at the community hall, and we had an amazing turnout. We had over 300 people show up in person, and then over 100 people were live stream and watching online.
Good for you for making sure, to hold a hybrid there, because I imagine a lot of folks live remote. Lots of northern communities, not just indigenous communities. That is a real struggle in connecting people, is like trying to get them just in one place for a meeting. Like, forget having the time. You need the money to travel too, right? The gas money, if nothing else. But how did that meeting differ from, your other experiences of talking perhaps in circles, although, needed discussions? How did we move it forward?
Yeah, so this one we really wanted to focus on being informational, the different impacts that this pipeline would have, to give a full picture, because the industry doesn't paint the full picture ever. We had some salmon biologists come in, which are also part of the youth group, my cousin, and she did a presentation on the current salmon state in our area and the impacts that this project will have on all the different crossings and species. Tins as a doctor, and she's part of a group that are trying to get support to stop the LNG development because of all the health risks. So there's doctors that are signing on, being like, these projects bring in so much health risk. We are not going to work in the communities that they bring them in because it's too dangerous. So she did a video for us to explain all the short-term health impacts and the long-term health impacts of the LNG industry, from being in your house, having oil and gas fueling your house, to the effects of shipping and exporting and everything. And then we also had an update just to break down what the PRGT is, who owns it, all the different confusing complexities that comes with that most people don't understand. And then we also got youth at the end, and we had some Simogits from neighboring nations that are also fighting industry. We had some folks from Shimshan.
Different extraction industries, even.
Same one, same projects, the pipeline industry. But yeah, they came and spoke about their fights against industry, and yeah, it was just a really empowering, uniting moment of everyone coming together from all these different nations, from like Prince Rupert, Gitz'an, Smithers. Yeah, it was just a really heartwarming experience. And then at the end, we got all the youth to come up. And at first, we only had 2 youth who would talk. We were trying so hard to get speakers, and they're all like, no. And by the end of that event, we had about like 30 youth come and stand at the top, and about eight speakers come up and share why they care about the Lax'yip, which is our word for territory, Gitz'an territory. So they came and shared why they care about the Lax'yip and why they want to protect it and why we shouldn't let this pipeline come through. And it was just really inspiring, and it was, you could feel a shift in the room with everybody, and like it went from being really depressing and like, damn, what are we going to do about this, to like, we're going to do this.
Yeah, I think seeing youth step forward, answer the call in that way is going to do that to folks. You folks carry with you a certain type of energy, obviously, not that just comes with youth, but also, it's just a generational perspective. You're starting from a different point than anybody else was. You seem to be ready to hit the ground running. So impressive to get that kind of turnout with a week's planning. Like, as an organizer, let me tell you, like, you just cross your fingers sometimes. I mean, you work, you do the things that you need to do, but in the end, you just like hope people come. And to have hundreds of people not just come, but like engage in meaningful ways is like just and a testament to you probably are a natural at this. You may have not expected this of your future, but
Yeah.
I imagine the movement is happy that you're there. These are some incredible results. I hear you when you had to kind of pull yourself up there or be called up on stage, but like, don't knock yourself for that. I mean, we're taught to follow our elders, to kind of, our leaders look and talk a certain way. It's just ingrained into us. And so there's a little unlearning that we need to do. And, there's lots of circles where we're not including youth nearly enough. And, you're giving us plenty of reasons to examine that as well. Not just against pipelines, the environmental movement, but a lot of work but sometimes it's hard to bridge that generational gap. Do you have any tips on how to draw multiple generations to one discussion, and constructively too, right? There's communication barriers that exist.
Yeah, I don't know. For our event, we really wanted to also emphasize the respect and having a open conversation. So at the beginning of our event, we had it translated in Gitz'an to share what our goals were and how everyone should be respected and have a chance to speak if they want to, and all of that. So I think that really set the tone for everything, and people were just so impressed with that, and just bringing in that understanding that we need to have respect for everybody and be open to new ideas really changed the mood, because I think people were just stuck in like this negative way of thinking, and then just bringing in like a refreshing new perspective just opened everything up so much better.
Can you talk a bit more about the Firekeepers, making something out of that? What are you up to?
Yeah, so that was the meeting we had, was the first time our group came together. We were just came on the whim, and we named ourselves the youth of the Gitz'an Lax'yip, coming up with like, what are our plans? What do we want from this youth group? And then it just turned into like this huge thing of, it wasn't just about land protection and stopping the PRGT pipeline. It was about language revitalization, culture, bringing back traditional practices, getting kids out on the land, building capacity. It just turned into this huge thing that the youth wanted, and it was really inspiring and really like heartwarming to see that this is what all the young people want. We want all our culture back. We want our language. We want to learn our language. And it's so inspiring to have that, because I felt like before, as a young person, other people didn't really care about these things, and it's just like kind of a thing you get told, I guess, through society, that we don't care about stuff. But I'm like, actually, we do care about stuff. And it's really adamant, and it shows in our meetings that the young people do care, and they want better, and they want different than what's been happening. I started some public speaking around just like our community and what we're facing. So I started bringing more awareness, and then people started reaching out to help us grow as a group, and now are now our full society, and we're getting some funding set up now. We're going to be doing lots of collaborations in this summer and spring. We're doing lots of training and building up capacity so that we can have our own youth taking in assessments of our territory and land. So we have our own baseline assessments to use when industry comes and tells us that there's no impacts.
You have an answer ready for them.
Yeah.
You've got receipts.
Yep.
It's awful, yeah, that folks often have to do a lot of the work themselves, providing the proof that is likely already there in industry's hands, just not available to you.
Yeah.
With most of the players, the power players, or I should use quotations, power, because we have the power, but they know exactly what's going on. It's not them that you're trying to educate. I came across your name through a change course email, inviting me to a webinar that I unfortunately missed, but I can only imagine, you shared a lot of this with them, and maybe in greater detail, but I'm wondering, from talking to people and going around and doing this public speaking, are you learning anything other than, public speaking skills, which you are doing a great job at? But I mean, about your allies, about other organizations maybe doing this work, or just the general public, like now that you're talking beyond your community?
Yeah, I've been learning so much, and it's been awesome from all the support I've been getting. We've been getting emails from so many different organizations and youth groups that are wanting to help. So Change Course has been one of the awesome ones, and they've been helping us out a lot with getting our awareness out there and supporting our voice and uplifting our voice. And yeah, doing these like webinars has also taught me to learn about the other side of the country's problems too. I'm like, I didn't know anything that's been going on in Ontario or those pipelines either. So I'm like, it's helped me bring awareness to the other fights that people are having. But it also brings like us together in a collective, like we're all doing this for the better, and we're all part of a fight. We just have different fights that we're fighting.
It can be overwhelming, right? Trying to keep track of just what's happening in your backyard, and then finding out that, oh man, you folks are dealing with this too. But on the flip side, it's like, okay, well then what have you learned, right? Like, can we
Yeah.
just learn from each other's mistakes? And lifting each other up is an obvious one. But yeah, sometimes it's also comforting to know that you're not the only community
Yeah.
who's trying to navigate all these relationships between the province and banks and the energy industry. And it's really unfair, unfortunately, that indigenous folks have to even navigate that, while a company that is unwanted enters their land and develops on it. I mean, the restraint people have shown, the indigenous people have shown, I think, like, doesn't get spoken of a lot. Like, people like to shit on blockades or more direct actions, and Lord knows the RCMP love to tear them apart and call them illegal and whatnot. But like, what would you do if you were sitting here and this was happening to your water, to your people, and you never got a say in it? And frankly, like, nobody around you, it's hard stretch to find anybody who's really on board. And I imagine there's a feeling of helplessness, but then, the more connections you make, that feeling kind of breaks down a little bit. You start to realize your power, but that's a whole lot of nonsense to unpack too, right? I imagine your notes are extensive, trying to, if like you had to explain to me the ins and outs of this one pipeline, right? The Prince Rupert gas transmission, right? You keep using it. That was the acronym, the PRGT. That's just like one of 3 pipelines that Change Course just focused on in their most recent day of action. And like, even I'm trying to digest as much as I can to share it with the audience, right? On like the smallest little basis, right? Just to give them, and I'm going, oh my gosh, my head is spinning. And did I name all the companies right? And it's, really at its root is just like, this is unceded territory, and this agreement is, I mean, bogus. It's like a very inarticulate way to describe it. But 15 years after an environmental assessment, surely, I mean, and for folks, just one of the details there, it actually does like expire. It was supposed to be 10 years, right? Like, it was supposed to end, and it was like just barely, right? Just barely. They like, put a shovel in the dirt
Yeah.
before the deadline, and it was like,
Yeah, they cleared a couple kilometers of trees and said it was like millions and millions of money they invested into this project, so that's why they have to start it now.
yeah, that's an argument. I think a lot of people, we've already invested so much. We can't turn back now. It's like the whole theme of the White Castle movie. Right? It's just like, it's too far now. Just keep going. Forget the long-term costs. We don't work that into the discussion. And even, yeah, the discussion on LNG is kind of in its infancy stages, right? Because the industry spent a lot of money telling us that this was the clean alternative to the fossil fuels that we had already zeroed in on and built campaigns around. And they're like, okay, fine. It was almost like, okay, but LNG. And it took us a while to be like, hey, no, wait. These are also bad, so kudos to the folks who just stuck with the no pipelines, right? Like, I'm pretty sure putting pipes through the earth and clear cutting trees and putting these next to water, no matter what's in them, unless it's water,
Yeah.
is a good idea. I guess there's needs based for energy. We could talk about that, but clearly that's not a good idea from an environmental perspective. I don't care what your environmental assessment says. Like, plus, like, who sets those criteria too? Like, the government.
Yeah.
It's not done in consultation with indigenous people or like that real understanding of the land or anything. It's just like they're negotiated numbers amongst industry. I mean, where are you folks at now? Like, so the likely will a blockade go back up. I mean, not perhaps associated with your group, but it's likely a tactic that will be deployed. Are you folks planning things for folks who are already that don't need that that educational stage? Because you've probably got people in your community that are enraged and wanting to channel that energy into things. Do you have any plans that you can share with us?
I don't know. Right now, we're in basically just like a waiting period stage. So our group is looking to finalize our calls to action because we're trying to figure out our place we have in this. Since we're youth group, we're not based on house hereditary systems, which is what those pipeline agreements are based on, different WILPs which were signed. So we can't really say like we have a collective behind the WILPs or any house to be like stand with us. We don't really have land to go use. So we're trying to really uphold the other people that have land and they have a unified opposition on, but it's all waiting for the BC government's decision if this assessment gets extended indefinitely or not. Lots of people are wanting to help, and we're like, yeah, I know you guys want to help, but we got to figure out the best way right now.
Folks can definitely start to follow your work and get informed so they're ready to jump on board. But also, I imagine, are you encouraging people to contact the BCNDP, the folks that are about to make this decision? Are we appealing to them? Or I know like sometimes that feels a little fruitless, especially, the premier is very excited to push through as many energy projects as possible right now
Yeah.
because of Trump, or at least that's the reason he's using. How tough of a spot to be in to kind of just hold your breath and wait for the powerful to make a decision. And not that means it's going to either stop your work or start it. It's just a matter of having to choose a pathway at that point. But yeah, no, it takes all kinds, right? Like there has to be folks that are out there educating people, because if you don't know the extent of it or even where to start, it's impossible to even pick it up as a cause.
We've been working with Dogwood too. They have some great things on their website that can give you like a form and quick way to message or call the ministers that will be regarding this decision. So you can go to their website and find some quick, easy ways to write an email or call one of the ministers and tell them they need a new environmental assessment. And through Change Course, they've been doing some day of actions for us just to bring some awareness about the banking investments for these projects and how they're used in all of our universities, basically, and how our money is funding these projects that Indigenous people do not consent to. So I think that's really awesome that they're bringing awareness to those and like getting people to divest their money and pick where they want their money to go to and have a say in that. I think is also really important and powerful that we can use to turn away these massive banks from investing in these horrible projects.
We spoke to Change Course. I'll link both the call to action you mentioned with Dogwood and the episode with Change Course where they talk about their theory of change there on campus. And I think we called it Stigmatizing Capitalism on Campus. But yeah, the 5 big banks were their most recent targets. I think Scotiabank and RBC and Scotiabank being the worst offenders there. Folks need to hone in on that. We did share that action with our live audience, but it's interesting to hear from the organizers' perspective as well. These groups working with one another. The amount of work being done to try to lobby the BCNDP is also frustrating for me because for a lot of progressive organizers and whatnot, that was an electoral victory. So, seeing so many resources and precious energy going into pleading with them to do the right thing. Let's hope the ruling goes in your favor.
Yeah.
However, we are curious to hear what you'll be up to afterwards, regardless. So when you get there, you'll have to check in with us and let us know how we can move forward. Because even if it's a delay, there's still a fight on your hands, right? Like it's not, it'll probably just be another environmental assessment ordered.
Yeah, it's a lot to go through. Like I've never had to strategically plan before. Like trying to figure out how to be smart and stuff, and just like coming new into all of this is so much to learn. So I'm more on the hesitant side of like acting right away because I'm like I'm no pro in this. But I'm learning as I go, and it's really interesting to learn the different strategies and things. It takes a lot of planning and thinking.
It does. I mean, even the smallest things take a lot of consideration. Things you don't even know you don't know.
Yeah.
Do you have elders? Do you have elders that you can kind of lean on who have tried various tactics and used different strategies and
Yeah.
had them work or not work?
We have lots of elders that we can go to that have been having lifelong battles against industry, but that's something I really want to incorporate more with our youth group now, because our youth group has just been doing this basically all on our own so far. We haven't got really any help from any adults. It's just been us. So I'm like, I really want to bring in some people with expertise to help us wrinkle out the edges and like really solidify our group, because most of us are just like, I've never done this before. But we're learning and doing everything for the first time. So I think that's our next move, is to really incorporate some knowledge from our knowledge keepers and get some tips from what worked in the past and what didn't work.
Yeah, I'm sure there's other nations as well out there that have dealt with very similar situations, even just in BC. So, yeah, and I love that maybe perhaps you're making the BC government and the federal government a little bit nervous, putting all these people in contact with one another. They rely on silos, right? They rely on you being overwhelmed by your battle and other folks doing their thing. But when folks join forces like this, it's can be incredibly productive. Yeah, it's a joy to see a lot of different collectives coming together and hitting different pressure points, right? Government pressuring banks. Someone's going to break.
Yeah. And fortunately, we got to learn a lot from the CGL that came in a few years before. So our neighbors and my family, I'm Gitz'an and Wet'suwet'en, so lots of the Gitz'ans were in solidarity and showed up to help their neighbors. So now we're going to have lots of help coming from our neighbors this round, and we learned a lot from the last one. So we're coming in way more prepared, and we understand how they work a little bit better now. But I know they're going to be coming in swinging harder this time too.
Yes, I never want to put too much faith in court rulings. The RCMP I mean, they didn't face any repercussions out of it whatsoever. So,
Basically, they did wrong things, but not enough to get punished for them, is the extent.
or to negate the arrests, right? Like folks still faced conviction.
Not enough to get any repercussion for that.
The colonial state has a scale of racism they'll tolerate within the legal system. We don't know what it looks like. It's very arbitrary. One judge gets to decide what that is. Very frustrating. I'd like to think maybe at some degree they're like, maybe they can't go in as hard as they did to those blockades. I mean, but then again, as I'm saying this, I'm remembering that their tactics were not criticized whatsoever by the judge. You know, the using the dogs or having snipers in position.
Or not having identification. They were all allowed to do that. And I was like, okay, so you say it's not allowed, but in this case, they're allowed. So it's just setting an example. Basically, that they can do things that they're not allowed to and get away with it.
In the law, yeah, and then that's where everyone else's job steps in, right? Like at some point, not that we ignore the law, but that there are other pressures involved and other sources of power that need to be taken into consideration, methinks, right? And the idea is to just build them as forceful as possible so that they are taken into consideration, right? The youth must be heard on some of these issues.
Mm-hmm.
That's an easy sell, I think, to the most of the population at this point. I think a lot of my generation, I'm not going to say how old I am, but I'm older, coming to the realization that youth actually perhaps know a little bit better, and they're in a mindset that some of it is a little nihilistic, just being immersed in all of this catastrophe all the time and going, well, fuck it. I'm gonna, I got nothing to lose. I'm fighting this, it's not an acceptance of that destiny, but if there's anyone reluctant out there to involve youth in organizing or letting them lead, I think listening to you will help them maybe dissolve some of those worries. But there's been plenty of examples out there of youth stepping up in these times for all sorts of movements. So yeah, it is hopeful for us old folks to see that. It brings a new energy even to us. So I very much appreciate you kind of coming in to share how that's going and how you got there. Maybe we can get more folks, more youth to step up into these kinds of roles.
I agree. I think our meeting that we had really opened the eyes to everyone, because after that meeting, they saw how much of our youth caring about these issues and putting time into learning about these issues, and how lots of our youth are in school right now or graduated already. So we've already went and learned all these different things to come back and help us at home. And they're realizing like, hey, these kids actually know something. We have so many kids in environmental sciences and in biology and just in the healthcare fields. Like, we're getting super educated and coming back and bringing that to our community. Not saying you need Western education to be smart, but it is a helpful tool fighting these Western systems.
It is, and it's no wonder, I guess, so many youth from the community go into these fields, right? Even if they maybe don't see themselves stepping into these types of roles, but just seeing these developments happen around them surely influence what they want to learn more about, albeit from a Western perspective. But, you got to know the tools your enemy are using just as much as you got to know your own, right? So there's value in all sorts of that education, even though it costs too much, right? But that's another discussion for another podcast, I suppose. But thank you so much, Drew, for not just coming on, but, the work on the ground that you're doing, and just know that you're doing a fabulous job and folks are learning from you all the time. So very much appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Glad I could share some and maybe help someone learn a little bit more.
I'm sure you did. And like I said, folks, if you want to know more, go to the show notes. We will link you to Drew's organizations and some of the articles that will explain the issues around the pipeline and LNG as well. So lots for folks to continue learning from, thanks to Drew.
Awesome.
That is a wrap on another episode of Blueprints of Disruption. Thank you for joining us. You can follow us on Twitter at BP of Disruption. If you'd like to help us continue disrupting the status quo, please share our content, and if you have the means, consider becoming a patron. Not only does our support come from the progressive community, so does our content. So reach out to us and let us know what or who we should be amplifying. So until next time, keep disrupting.